Well, I am rather busy.
Now he's going to move like right along to McGregor. That's his whole life, you know.
All right, Richard. So I know you were very excited for the return of Eugene Tooms.
Yes, the sequel.
But to begin this conversation, I have a fun fact about the actor who plays Eugene Tooms that I found out this weekend.
Can he actually stretch to fit into small spaces?
Actually, yes.
Oh.
That was not an effect. Also, he was born in Dover, Delaware.
Oh, my God.
It's possible that I knew him.
What if you two went to school together?
And
he was like your best friend.
We did not go to school together.
And your best friends were the actor who played Eugene Tooms.
Do you know how far Dover is from where I grew up?
No.
There you go.
Look, Delaware is like 2 hours and you're out of the state. So how far could it be?
So how did you feel about the return of Tooms?
You know, better than the introduction of Tooms.
Okay.
I still don't know why they were so fascinated with this particular fellow. I still don't like him really that much as a villain, but using him again, I thought they used it more effectively. In a way, my issues with the initial one, why does he eat livers, why is it like this, seem to be erased by the fact that, okay, well, this is just how it is. It's using its own mythology in a way. Can't figure out what the timeline of this is. Like, it feels like they went back to this well a little too early. Number one, he's being released on parole already. And I'm thinking, well, already? Like, that's a little... If we're going with the real time of how the episodes are being released, it's not even a year.
Well, he wasn't...
That was the other...
I'll give you the rundown. So, as I understand the events of Squeeze, and now, 9 months later, Tooms... It is 9 months. He was not convicted of anything.
No.
He was not actually on trial for murder. He was not charged with murder. He was actually in psychiatric care for the assault on Scully.
Yes.
And so he's not getting out on parole. He's just
yeah.
getting out of the psychiatric facility because his doctor feels that he is able to go out and be supervised in the world again.
It was a isolated incident. And I got that, but then at the end of the episode, in 9 months, the houses have been completely torn down and a mall has been completely erected in the area.
Yes,
that's when I found like that complex.
Was a little.
Yeah.
That was just kind of one of those things you have to overlook, I guess. I mean,
I figured like if this had happened in season 2, maybe. But on the other hand, because they died by the bugs in last week's episode, and now this is the episode we have, they are actually reliving their experiences and the X-Files in a sort of afterlife.
It's very possible.
So that's how this makes sense.
I mean, Born Again kind of had a little bit of an Eve vibe to
it.
No, yeah, I think that's right. I mean, certainly if we're picking nits at things like that, I think that we both like the episode. I mean, I know I like this episode.
Yeah.
I think that in a strange way, Tooms is tonally a little bit more X-Files-ish because I think this is actually a pretty funny episode and not to the degree of like, haha, it's a comedy or anything. But there are just moments in it where they're sort of, because they've already done this, right?
Yeah.
We've seen this in Squeeze. They've played this straight before. So we don't need to see that again. There's not even really much investigation in this episode because, of course, they already know what they're doing and why they're doing it.
Yeah, it's all stakeout.
Right. It's all stakeout. It's all watching Tooms do weird things and murder his psychiatrist, which, haha, that's, funny.
I'll say, if they, on the one hand, they're saying, well, if he murdered the foster parents, it would be too obvious. He would never do that. So he murders the psychiatrist, which will never be traced back to him at all.
Yeah, I don't know what the hell happened there. He just seemed to snap or something. But
the implication, I guess, is that this is the final liver before and so he just needs to fucking get out. But then again, why wouldn't he just eat 2 livers and only have to eat 4 next time?
Maybe he can't. Maybe he can't save it. I don't know what we know the rules of Eugene Tooms are. But yeah, I think that's what I'm talking about. It's like the episode is much less interested in Tooms as a villain or as a character.
Yeah.
I mean, the episode really isn't about him. It's about Mulder and Scully and how they're reacting to this situation. It's also about, I mean, we will talk about Walter Skinner, but it's also about sort of the sort of meta plot that's being developed around the X-Files. We get the cigarette smoking man again, who now talks for the first time. Yeah. But in the Tooms stuff, I think that it's got this sort of black humor to it that I appreciate. I mean, they kill the guy by basically jacking him into an escalator.
Which, if you want to hear our podcast on Mallrats, we did that as part of our special.
I like the cross
Check
promotion.
It Out presents.
And also the whole thing about the by the book stuff, and then at the end of the episode, Mulder doesn't pull his gun on him; he instead murders him with an escalator. I don't know that that's really a by the book way to stop a suspect from charging at you. I'm just saying. But I just think there's a lot of little moments in this episode that they're playing around. They're already starting to, I think, play around with the edges of what the X-Files are, because again, they've already told this story.
Yeah.
So they're able to sort of go at it sideways.
But I think that, and again, we have a further developed, by this point, the relationship between the two, already strong from the beginning, is further developed. But there are a lot of parallels to earlier stuff. She calls him Fox at one point in this episode, and he immediately starts laughing, which was a nice callback to Beyond the Scene when he calls her Dana, and she's like, "All right, you're pitying me." Like they will always be on a last name basis to each other, but that is no less intimate.
In a way, it's more intimate.
Yeah,
I think. I mean, because really, it's a shared identity that they both have for each other.
Mulder and Scully. It's the
I mean, why? I mean, it makes me wonder. Like, obviously, there was probably an unspoken thing, or maybe a spoken thing about Mulder saying, "Hey, you know what? Call me Mulder. Don't call me Fox." I don't know what FBI agents call each other. I mean, I know they're supposed to call themselves Agent all the time.
Yeah.
I don't know if they do that.
I mean, I would assume that. You know, if it's a superior or someone you don't know, you would just and especially 20 years ago, Agent Mulder, Agent Scully is how they would know each other at first. And you get the sense that, again, in Beyond the Sea is the first time that they're really dealing with something a little more personal and sensitive. And so he's taking this as all right, well, we've broached that moment. We're now on a first name basis. And, you know, she's trying this again there. This is the kind of last gasp of that attempt to but they recognize that first name basis is not the signifier of their, you know, respect and affection for each other.
And not only that, but I think in a strange way, I mean, it like I said, it makes them a little bit closer, because you get the impression that, of course, no one in Scully's real life is calling her Scully, or calling her Dana, and vice versa. I mean, I think that you know, Mulder saying that he even made his parents call him Mulder is a funny line. Who knows if that's actually true? But I think that I want to talk more about the relationship in the episode, but I kind of want to go down like run down a few of the key scenes that I think are highlights of this episode. I think in terms of the humor, at least, because again, I think it is really funny. At least, well, maybe not funny is the right word, but it's amusing. You've got Mulder and Scully standing in the hallway. Tooms comes out, gives them that weird look.
Yeah.
You've got Tooms picking up the roadkill, licking his fingers. You've got the woman who is having the humorous battle with her toilet. And it's like, what? Like, I like it because you've got this killer stalking her husband. And instead of focusing on the killer stalking her husband, we're focusing on.
She's snaking her toilet with this, like.
Who owns a toilet snake, by the way? Does anyone actually own a toilet snake and have it readily available at a moment's notice at 9:00 at night to be snaking your toilet?
As the first resort, not even just using all right, well, you know, plunge. Okay, let's get the toilet snake out.
She's a very capable woman.
Yeah.
And then you've got the scene with the sandwich. I mean, you know, Scully makes a little joke about it being liverwurst. I just think that it's, I don't know. It's so interesting to me to see the show. Be able to pull that kind of stuff off, because it's not really something that, I mean, certainly the show's been a little funny a little bit here and there, but not really to this degree.
Well, I would say not funny, but a little absurd. It's not. It's
absurd is a good word.
It's funny to say this in a show that's dealing with paranormal phenomena to the degree that is, but this episode in particular is not even remotely going for realism. And I mean, the standout set piece was when the, you know, ancient sheriff in the wheelchair, you know, goes to it's here, and it's never explained why he has this epiphany, but he just knows and he's right, and they excavate a skeleton in cement. Like, this is as over the top. It's almost camp.
Yes.
It's not.
Yes, it is.
And I'm a person who appreciates camp as a way of highlighting the seriousness of things. I don't think
you may enjoy later seasons of the X-Files.
Okay, then. Yeah, all right. This is a campy episode. And I think
right. Yeah.
I think that's kind of why I could appreciate this episode more than I could Squeeze. Squeeze, I think, was it trying to take the idea of a 100-year-old liver-eating, stretchy guy seriously. And this is realizing that a 100-year-old liver-eating, stretchy guy is kind of silly. So we're going to go with it. We're going to have these, we're going to run with it. We don't need to be in the realms of realism right now. In a way that's kind of holding us back. We're dealing with the bizarre end of the spectrum. Let's fucking go.
Yeah, I think that's right. And key to that I think is the performance of Tooms in this episode because I'm not saying it's much better than
it's more bestial in a way which
it is, and I think that while he's given more to work with, obviously,
yeah.
in Squeeze he was basically just a serial killer, and okay, you can do with that what you will. I don't even remember if he talked in Squeeze. I don't think he did.
A line or two, nothing very major either
but
way.
Yeah, I don't know if he did or not, but in this episode, of course, he does talk. He doesn't talk very much, but everything he says just makes the guy seem checked out mentally.
Yeah.
And because obviously Tooms is not a character. We don't know anything about him really, aside from the fact that he was 100 years old or something like that, and he comes out every 30 years, eats 5 livers, and goes back to sleep. We don't know anything about his parents or what he likes to eat, or we do, or
his inner life. We don't get a sense of could he explain what he does for his life? Does he know that he eats 5 livers and hibernates for 30 years? Or is that just is there something insectile about it that's what it does? This is an engine to do this.
Right, but he must be intelligent to some degree because he has been able to
get a job.
Get a job, yes, but also elude capture for 90 years. I mean, that's not something that a stupid person could necessarily do. I mean, serial killers in general are usually fairly intelligent. So I think it's fair to call him a serial killer, even if he's doing it for some sort of biological need or something like that. I mean, you could get into a whole discussion about serial killers, but...
Well, I remember from the initial episode, one of the theories they float is that he's drawn to the challenge, going to more and more secure places, and, because in the scene where he's, again, stalking the guy with the toilet snake and all, he's doing a lot more work than he needs to. There are so many more people he could have eaten on the way home that would have been easier targets. Again, if all you want to do is eat a liver and it doesn't really matter, go into the alleys of Atlantic City. There's a bunch of homeless people that you can eat there. The show has shown that. I don't mean to cut you off, but I think one of the key things about this is kind of a tangent, but I think it's key to this episode as well, is that that's actually more profound than you think it is, because I like serial killer stuff. I follow it. I read serial killer blogs, and I'm not a creep, I swear. But one of the key theories about why, because people are always like, where did all the serial killers go? There are no serial killers, right? And there was this fascinating study that came out just a couple months ago that basically posited that there's probably like 5 active serial killers in each major American city, which is a lot more than anybody expected. But it's also that they are no longer murdering victims that anyone cares about. They're murdering prostitutes. I'm not saying, I'm not making judgments here. I'm saying, society doesn't value their lives. These are people that are on the fringes of society. Don't necessarily have families, or, somebody who's homeless will not necessarily have somebody checking up on them, and therefore the case will get cold quicker.
Exactly.
That kind of thing.
So a serial killer is someone who has a compulsion to kill, a psychological compulsion to murder people, to kill people. And so they've wised up, essentially, and they're picking their targets. They're picking the homeless. They're picking sex workers, prostitutes, people like that, that society devalues and perhaps don't have a lot of societal ties for someone to go, hey, where did Angela go? Nobody pays attention to Angela, so nobody knows that she's dead. So I think that in this episode, it's kind of an interesting thing that Tooms is, I think you're right, like going the exact opposite of that. He's trying to break into someone's house and murder them while their wife is still awake.
Yeah.
I mean, that is pretty ballsy stuff.
Yeah. He doesn't need to do that. But, and again, he's...
And let's not forget, he frames Mulder.
Yeah.
For assault.
Yeah. Fucking Tooms. So we have a callback to the original reason the X-Files are... Now, is this the introduction of Skinner, or have we seen him before?
Yes.
Okay. Because originally Scully was assigned to the X-Files with the implicit assignment to look into Mulder, to force these to be by the book, which is going to make these cases fall apart. As she says, we've got a very good conviction and solved case rate, and we're using these unorthodox investigations. If we are going by the book, these cases are not going to be solved, and then frankly the FBI will have an excuse. Well, your casework is so, you have only a 20% success rate. You can,
right.
You need to be assigned elsewhere.
Which is why I like that scene so much, because the way that she phrases that, of course, is, hey, are you aware of this? And of course what she's really doing is, you guys are fucking with us. And it's, Skinner's picking up on it as well.
And you get the sense in the end of the episode that the guy smoking cigarettes is somebody who
he needs a name, like cigarette smoking man or something.
Is that's the official how they refer to him in scripts and shit, or
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
I don't know as much about the X-Files as I do about Star Trek, but
okay. I mean, I know the character doesn't have really a name.
They refer to him later in the show, I think, as Cancer Man sometimes, which is fine. He actually does have a name. I mean, you find it out at some point. But yeah, he's definitely a character that is still very unformed at this point. I mean, I think that all the characters, well, aside from Mulder and Scully, are unformed at this point.
They're more what they represent. Again, Deep Throat, we've seen Deep Throat a lot more. We have a little more of an idea of what Deep Throat represents, even if we don't exactly know what part is the truth that he's telling. But
interestingly enough, no one ever calls him Deep Throat in the show.
Yeah.
We don't know the guy's name. No one ever refers to him as anything. I mean, I think the only way Mulder ever refers to him to Scully is informant or something. I don't even remember what he says, but he doesn't call him anything in particular. And so I think that that's kind of key to it as well, is that there's this shadowy conspiracy that's, we don't know what they're doing, essentially, because at the end of the episode, the cigarette smoking man, Skinner asked me, do you believe them? And he says, well, yeah, of course I do.
I mean, this is a man who knows that there is a secret room with all of this alien evidence shit, and he's handled evidence from them and placed it in there. So yes, he is well aware of other, and in a way, you get the sense that he is able to give the imprimatur to the X-Files.
Yeah.
He is obviously overwriting Skinner at that end scene. Skinner is ready to just toss them out, and by saying, no, I believe them, this will be believed. This work should continue. And whether he and Deep Throat are acting from the same agency or against each other.
Well, I think that's one of the key questions. And, I've always said to you, don't put too much stock in the mythology of the show, because it never really makes a lot of sense. And it kind of, which is not true. I think that it does make sense up to a certain point, and then, after season 5 or 6, it starts to fall apart, and we will have a good time talking about exactly why it falls apart. But
I get the sense the characters, though, are supposed to be slightly archetypal in many ways.
Yes.
Again, the fact that he's not referred to as a name, but as a title for his appearance in a lot of ways.
Well, I think that's key to the scene where Scully looks at the cigarette smoking man, and she obviously, she's having a dual reaction there, which is who the fuck is this guy and why is he in Skinner's office? And then also, I think she realizes and she recognizes that he was also there in the room when she was first assigned to the X-Files in the pilot. Yeah,
she knows that he's... This is the third time, I believe, she's seen him. Again, she saw him twice in the first episode.
Yeah.
He was there during the debriefing or whatever.
Yes. Yeah. That's right.
So and it says a lot that she doesn't seem to be able to ask, who are you? That there was given no introductions, and she is essentially... There is a tacit admission that she is not allowed to acknowledge him. and that he's not going to acknowledge her. Like, he's in the room, but that's, don't pay attention to him. He's just a living camera in a way.
I think so, because one of the things that is always key to the X-Files, I think, and I don't know if the real FBI is like this. I mean, I've only ever had experiences with the FBI, watching television shows, and then also that brief time when I was considered to be a serial killer. But
that's how you know so much.
That's how I know so much. But that's not true. Just want to make it clear that I was not ever under investigation for being a serial killer. That it seems to me that the FBI is a very hierarchical organization that is very classically top down. And I'm assuming that when Scully was summoned to Skinner's office, he was not introduced.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the unspoken culture of the FBI that, well, he wasn't introduced, so I can't talk to him.
Yeah.
Which is weird, but I think it's internally consistent with the way the show has portrayed the FBI so far.
And let's just thought experiment, swap Scully with Mulder in that room. Mulder's asking who that guy is.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I think that's why it's not.
Yeah.
Partly why.
But the fact that we are, again, difference between the two of them. I really like the exchange when they're talking about, he says to her, if you legitimately don't believe this, that's okay. I can respect that. Because at this point, Scully has shown that she is very evidence-oriented. And the evidence has not convinced her, and that means to Mulder, all right, well, I've just got to work twice as hard to find certain evidence. But if you're doing it because you were told, not to, I can't. That's just bureaucratic nonsense.
Yeah, I think in that scene, Mulder is very, very close to being incredibly disappointed in Scully.
Yeah.
And she backs out of it, of course, because she realizes what she's doing. I don't know. I think that this episode, Scully has been portrayed as someone who is protective of her career, but is perhaps going down a road that is not going to end well for her, at least in a career sense.
Yeah, and it's interesting how Mulder both wants her to see what he's seeing, understand what he understands, and live how he lives, while also recognizes, again, when he's trying to convince her, don't go on the stakeout, like, that he doesn't want her to go too far, because in a way she's his lifeline. He, I think, recognizes the degree to which he is allowed to be doing what he's doing through her in some ways. And, so there is a very fine line that Scully needs to toe between, doing what the Bureau wants, playing by their rules because that's whose house they're in, and still being in the service of the truth and what is right.
Yeah, I think so. And also, interestingly enough, I think that it is key to the episode, the case's placement in this episode, because Squeeze was it wasn't the first case they did. The pilot was the first case they did, but Squeeze was the second case they did. It was sort of in effect, the first real case they did, because they were already, she was assigned to the X-Files at that point, and they kind of went on from there. But let's not forget that the murders were not solved at the end of that episode.
Tooms was not part of that 70% success rate.
Right, that exactly. He was not part of that 70% success rate. And so in this episode, you revisit that case from much earlier in their career, basically at the beginning of their working relationship. And Scully has found, I think, pretty solid evidence that Tooms did murder this person that was killed in 1933. So at least in terms of Scully's ability to believe what the evidence is telling her, I think that this episode in particular is a very, very key development in that regard.
I just completely forgot. Who was the person in the cement that it turned out to be?
It was just a murder victim of Tooms.
Why was it? But didn't they say, like, oh, this victim is going to be... Oh, it was the teeth that they were able to find that from. But I thought the implication was he put them there because it would have been connected to them.
Yeah, they never really explained that. I don't know what that was about, but, we'll just...
You see a wedding ring, maybe it was a wife or, a parent or something, but...
Yeah, so...
Okay.
Yeah.
I still think the episode might have been a little more effective a little later in the run after it had said a little more, but I liked this episode a lot more than Squeeze.
Well, that's all we can ask.
Thank you.
And I'm glad that you liked Tooms, because now we have Born Again to contend with.
And see, I really liked Born Again. I know it's probably not a great episode, but I liked it. I think I like ghost episodes.
I don't care about ghosts.
I do.
I don't know.
Again, going for my theory that they are in purgatory reliving their cases over and over again, this is part Eve, part Shadows in some ways. We have somebody haunted by the ghost of a cover-up of a crime. And
yes, the world-famous Buffalo, New York, Chinatown. Yeah, I don't know.
It's a tiny. Certainly, it's a. I mean, Shadows had a bigger crime. It was the sale of weapons and all of that. This is a tinier thing, but it is still somebody was killed very horribly.
Yes, no, someone was killed very horribly. Of course, Charlie was drowned to death in his own fish tank. That is a horrible way to die, and I'm not going to pretend that it's not. I don't know. I just feel like with Born Again, it just feels like the X-Files on autopilot to me. It's very rote. It's not really saying anything. It's not really developing the relationships between Mulder and Scully to any real degree. It's got this sort of lazy sense of place that is just like, hey, we're on the East Coast and we got a bunch of Italians. It's just like, I don't know. The whole thing just is kind of like, what are you doing?
I think in a way, because I am so much less familiar with the X-Files than you are, you've seen 10 seasons of X-Files, and you've seen a lot of X-Files on autopilot by this point. I'm still new to it, so in a way, this is still kind of a little surprising, like, oh, this was a nice little story. I think you might be comparing this to other... you've certainly said about other episodes, they do this kind of story better off, and again, I think Shadows I like better than this episode, and I can see how there would be better episodes than either of these.
True, and I mean, I think you did convince me that Shadows is a better episode than I had remembered it being. I don't know that you're doing a very good job of convincing me that Born Again is a better episode than I think it is. But then again, we've only been talking about it for a couple minutes. I don't know. I just feel like, for me, fundamentally, what it comes down to is that it feels like a Ghost Ex Machina episode where reincarnation is the reason. Why this kid... What exactly is the reason for this? What is she doing? How is she able to do these things? And I'm not even talking about how is she able to murder these people, because, okay, telekinesis, fine, I'll buy that. But how is she actually getting to these places?
Yeah, no,
fundamentally, how is this 8-year-old girl getting out of her parents' house 5 towns over in the suburbs to downtown Buffalo? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, guest accommodations are mentioned at one point, so it's far enough away that if you're there at night, you're going to want to stay overnight and leave in the morning. Yeah. You're right. The thing it doesn't sell is why this little girl. They wanted to do a Bad Seed kind of a story, but they could. The episode with the tattoo the other week where the one guy's soul was in the other's body, and they were... Whether or not we believe that this can happen is irrelevant. The episode made it clear that, all right, well, when they were resuscitating him, it pulled in the wrong soul. Okay, I can believe that. We aren't told any reason other than she was born at the same time he died, why his soul went into her body. There is no other connection between the two of them. That is the weakest part of the episode. In Shadows, at least, there was a very strong relationship between the woman and her boss, and so of course he was going to haunt her. He doesn't know this girl. It's not like he was her father or anything.
Yeah, and I guess well, maybe that's part of the reason why I don't think this works so well, is because this show is already starting to develop different rules about reincarnation.
Yeah.
I mean, in that episode, reincarnation happened because the guy was really close to him. In this episode, it happened because she was born at the same time this guy died. So which one is it?
Yeah.
Is there more than one type of reincarnation? Why is it reincarnation? I mean, this is what the worst of the X-Files is, which is just Mulder randomly theorizing about some bullshit he read in News of the Week or whatever the fuck that thing was called that you buy on the newsstands, where it's like JFK was an alien. Weekly World News. And so it's like, oh, it's reincarnation. Well, what evidence does he have for that? And I think the X-Files at its best is always like, Mulder has this crazy theory, and then they justify it by doing investigation and evidence. Whereas this episode is Mulder has a crazy theory and he turns out to be right.
Well, see, the direction I originally thought it was going, at one point they mentioned that, people who are reincarnated have psychic powers. And see, that's where the episode fell apart. What I thought was going on was this was a girl who just happened to be born with these extreme psychic powers. The soul of this guy, Charlie, Ghost is wandering around, meets up with, sees this little girl, recognizes her psychic powers, figures, this is my opportunity to get revenge, and possesses her. That would have made sense. That would have been, again, just as in Shadows, the ghost hangs around the woman that was his protege and that he is, wants to help expose the crimes that he was killed over. In this one, he is a vengeful spirit who is using this little girl as a weapon. That's what I thought. I think that would have, again, not to talk about fixing the episode, but that may have given it a bit more of a plausible explanation for why this was going on.
Well, yeah, because really Mulder and Scully just stumble from moment to moment without actually really doing anything. I mean, they're not really part of the episode to a large degree.
Yeah.
They're not doing anything. They're not solving a mystery. They're not actively engaged in the plot. The plot is happening to them, and they're just standing there with their mouths open going, well, isn't that weird?
And unlike somebody like a Lauren Kite, who is an interesting character and the protagonist of the episode, and we're at least following her while Mulder and Scully investigate around it, the little girl is not an interesting character. She's a little girl.
Yeah, the little girl's not an interesting character. I mean, I think that she's a fine actress for an 8-year-old, but it's not really, it's not very difficult to direct someone to sit there blankly. I'm sure I could probably do it. But it is the case where this episode tries to fake you out by saying, okay, well, she murdered this guy at the beginning of the episode. She's some sort of evil omen child or whatever. And okay, if it had turned out to be that, it would have been really bad. But it's this other thing. And it just doesn't have a good enough hook for me to be able to justify why I should care about this, frankly. And also, I don't know. If these guys get murdered, do I care?
It's sad that,
Not really.
It's sad that the wife has to have 2 husbands die. Yeah, that's a shame. But, beyond that,
And it's just, I don't know, it's always wrapped up in sort of patriarchal bullshit about he felt guilty and married her because she wanted to take care of her. Why did she want to marry him? There's no indication given that she's a person with her own agency. She's always in the house. Does she have a job?
She's introduced baking,
Right, what are they, I don't know what they're trying to say here.
One thing I like about the episode is they're continuing this through line of deep regression hypnosis, which the term always cracks me up. But I mean, I found it very subtle in this episode. For example, when he suggests it to the psychiatrist and she dismisses it, he's a little pissed off, and he's really but that was what helped him to realize the truth about Samantha. There is a reason in this episode he's so obsessed with it, and I appreciate that the episode doesn't even mention that. I don't think it, I definitely get the sense it's not because they forgot it, but because they assume that if we've been watching, we know that, and if we don't, it doesn't kind of matter.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point, and it's a good example of the fact that this episode doesn't treat the audience shabbily. I mean, it definitely pays to pay attention, and it certainly has elements to it which have greater resonance if you've watched the previous episodes, and I think that is the case for most of the X-Files, that it never really treats the audience as stupid.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel as though yes, Scully is very observant to pick up on the fact that she's baking when he said his wife was sleeping. Okay, that's weird. What's going on there? I think the deep regression hypnosis stuff is interesting in as much as it gives us an interesting scene to watch.
Yeah.
And then it also gets us the image of the fish tank at the little diver guy at the end, and that's how they figure out what's going on. It just feels to me like a bunch of disparate elements that don't really gel together very well. Because is this episode about police corruption? Is this episode about drugs? Is this episode about ghosts? Is this episode about psychiatric malpractice? I don't know. And
if it was about this girl being possessed, is this about children who are abused lashing out at that kind of a thing?
Yeah, because they say a couple times that they're drugging her on Thorazine, which is a pretty severe medication to be giving anyone, let alone an 8-year-old girl. And I guess we're supposed to think that she's so zonked out because she's on fucking Thorazine.
I mean, that may be part of the. It's that's more of a kismet thing, but
it just strikes me as very strange because none of the, I mean, I guess it's a choice for none of the characters to be very sympathetic, but
yeah,
I don't like the mother in the episode. I don't like the wife. I don't like the guy. I don't like the insurance salesman who gets murdered by the bus. Who also has a black driver, then a driver that's white, then the same black driver again.
Really? I didn't see that.
It's a very powerful ghost.
This is very much an episode that works when you're watching it, but then when you're done watching it and you think about it, I mean, when I'm watching it, I'm seeing, oh, cool, kind of Final Destination type scenes, and, the house is being torn apart by psychic. I guess I really like scenes of psychic destruction. Maybe that's really it. Like, any episode which just has a house and a ghost or a psychic wave just trashes the house, I'm there.
Yeah, I suppose so. I mean, I just always wonder why people just don't leave the fucking house. Like, why are they all standing there staring at this happening? Just leave the house.
Because she psychically locks the door.
So break the window.
And then she psychically locks the window. And then she makes the glass shards like dance around in front of you. You're like, I can't get out here.
I think I would rather get cut up than stay in a house that is being attacked by a ghost.
Well, it wasn't a ghost. It was a psychic little girl who was the reincarnation of a dead cop.
Whatever. But it's just, you know what I mean? It's just like, I don't know what any of this is really supposed to add up to, and I don't think that any of it was all that entertaining, frankly. I mean, I'll be frank. I mean, I paused this like 3 times when I was watching it.
I spent a lot of this episode, I will admit, looking up on IMDb to figure out who the hell half of these actors are. Like, because this is a lot of the episodes have been, if you watched any show in the 90s, you've seen them in a dozen things. The cop lady is in Friends. The mother was in a couple of Star Treks.
Oh, which ones?
She was in the Masterpiece Society.
Oh.
And she was also the episode of DS9 where Odo is investigating
that was her
woman who turns out to be this false personality. Yeah.
A Simple Investigation.
Yeah.
Oh, that's where I saw her from. Yeah, okay.
And the little girl currently voices Pinkie Pie on My Little Pony. Voice acting of that stripe has been her career, but she has had every single actor I looked up has just been working constantly. Good for them.
I'm glad they're all acting, and I'm glad they're all paying their bills.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that they got a check for this episode of The X-Files. I just wish it was a better episode.
Well,
Well, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention your favorite little thing, of course, which is always the random tech person who appears for one episode and then disappears again. I don't know if he's very good at his, like, he seems very...
He is a very specific type of person, and he is fascinated by what he's doing, and he thinks that what he's doing is so impressive to everybody. Like, Mulder and Scully are sitting patiently and slightly bored during his explanation, which is going off a little too long. Like, I've known plenty of people, David is like this, who will tell a story where they're just like, all right, well, I'm going to do something amazing. And they're waiting for, so he wants Scully to say, oh, what are you going to do? Well, I'm going to do this. Oh, what's that? Oh, well, it's this technique. He wants them to be fascinated. He thinks he's showing them the secrets of the universe when they're just like, do the fucking thing, show us what it is.
But it's such a weird thing to write into an episode, though, because this guy is only in one episode, and as far as I remember, we never see him again. So it's not like they were trying to paint the guy as some sort of asshole.
No, but I think I kind of appreciate that, though, because it's much more interesting because the tech guy has a personality in a way. It's not like he's just faceless person number 3 that is anybody. I mean, think about a couple weeks ago, the handwriting expert. I forget that actress's name, but she's someone I've seen in other.
The woman who was aggressively hitting on Mulder?
Yeah, that's a personality too, and the way that she is a little cocky. Again, is it the most detailed or interesting personality? No, but it adds a little bit of color to what would have already been what might have been a nothing scene.
That's actually a good point, because I've heard, I forget where I read this, but I read a network television writer or somebody complaining about the fact that the network television hour-long dramas have gotten shorter and shorter, and half hours as well. We're talking about a show. The X-Files clocks in at at its least running time right now. It's like 44 minutes and 30 seconds or thereabouts. And now network television shows for an hour like 40 minutes, 41 minutes. Doesn't sound like a lot, but what I remember reading is that they said, well, what you lose is humanity. You lose little character moments. You lose the flavor, and it just becomes a slog to get through because you don't have anything in there to break up the tension, to really make it feel like a lived-in place. And I think that might be the problem with a lot of these sort of network procedurals nowadays, where you don't have the time for the tech guy to be a little bit weird. He just has to go, blah, here you go.
Although, you talk about Fringe, for example, as having you said that was kind of X-Files with a team, and maybe that's kind of the way to compensate for that. If you don't have the ability to, write a random tech person every week, well, maybe if you can only give someone a couple of scenes, but you give them scenes every week, you're able to get the characterization in piece by piece rather than just we have one strong character.
Yeah, sure. But I also think that, to ground it back in the episode, I think that he's perhaps like not that, I don't know, he's not that intellectually curious because early on in the episode when he's doing the composite drawing and, they're doing the funny mustaches and the girl's laughing. Yeah. It's a wonderfully touching scene. The monitor shorts out and he says, oh, maybe that's a software glitch. Like, what?
Well, again, that's his personality. He's somebody who will go for an hour, impressing you with something he knows well. But when there's something he doesn't know, he's, let's just go past that to the stuff that I can show off on.
I don't know. I think that's kind of justifying a bad line. Yeah, at the end of the day, it is what it is. You didn't justify me that it was a good use of my time. Oh. But I'm glad you enjoyed it. And I'm sorry that I shit all over it. But
it's okay. Maybe after this conversation, I wouldn't watch it again. But, nobody has still you haven't sold me on the importance of Tooms. And he's mentioned again in this episode as the reason that they're even brought in on this case because Janice from Friends, her brother knew.
He was on the Baltimore PD.
Yeah. So.
Which is fine. It's a nice little connection to the world. And I think it was probably a wise choice to pick a character that was on the show twice.
Yeah.
Because, if you didn't start watching the show in the beginning, you probably saw the episode last week. So let's just have a nice little crossover moment. Finally, we don't talk about this a lot, but I don't know that I really believe they were in Buffalo.
I don't. Part of me was like, are when they talked about Chinatown, I was like, so they've gone to New York for that? Like, are they going between Buffalo and New York City in this?
No, that's what I said earlier. Yeah. The world famous Buffalo Chinatown.
That's why I got confused. No,
which doesn't exist to my knowledge, and I've been to Buffalo.
And especially with the accents. Now, yes, upstate you will have accents, but
yes, for anybody who's listening to this show that lives on the West Coast, there are these things in other parts of the United States and the world called accents. People from different areas sound different. Now, from Seattle all the way down to San Diego, what you have is an undifferentiated style of speaking that all sounds the same.
Well, it sounds like television.
In, say, Philadelphia, you can go 2 blocks over and have a completely different accent. That's just the way things go on the East Coast.
Yinzers.
Yeah, it was fine. I don't know. At the end of the day, the episode was just kind of there. I didn't really like it. I've seen it way too many times.
I could see it having diminishing returns.
It has diminishing returns for sure. And I think I would have liked to have seen less of Gene, the wacky tech, and more brief scenes between Mulder and Scully. Because once again, Mulder and Scully are just running around in their own episode, not really having anything to do whatsoever.
So you really just want an episode that's just that for the entirety is the two of them on a stakeout and nothing happens and they're just, chatting.
Yes, I would love that.
I think that would be a very, I know later on they had all these people like Stephen King and I think William Gibson wrote an episode. And
that is true.
They get a bunch of random. So if I was a random writer going on the X-Files, that would have been my thing. Just a slice of life of.
Also would have been a good way for them to save money.
Yeah. Basically, I would have done X-Files Kevin Smith style.
All right. Well, if you have any thoughts on either of the episodes of the X-Files we just discussed, please leave a comment on the post for this episode of the podcast at tuninginshow.com. You can check out our Patreon at patreon.com/Trekabout Show, which coincidentally enough also financially supports our other long-running podcast, Trekabout. We are talking this week about the season 2 premiere of Star Trek Voyager, the 37s and Initiations.
Oh my God. 37?
Why did you say it like that?
Because it's the third Kevin Smith reference we've made on this podcast today.
37 is a Kevin Smith reference.
And if you would like to learn about Kevin Smith references.
Social media, we're on it. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Tuning In Show is our username in all those places. And as always, please leave us an iTunes review for tuning in. It is the best way for new people to find the show. Next week, we have done it. We have finished all of the X-Files.
Next week, we will have finished.
It was a amazing...
Because it's the future pluperfect tense.
One-season show that was canceled all too briefly.
At least it had a very large fan fiction community.
And then next week, we start our Doctor Who podcasts.
Oh.
None of that is
Which
true.
was a terrible show that went on too goddamn long.
I am soldiering my way through Doctor Who right now, and I cannot tell you why. Anyway.
If you would like to hear us talk about a Doctor Who series, you can do so if you are a patron.
You're really good on the cross-promotion this week. I'm
Thank
appreciating
you.
it. All right, we're talking about the episodes Roland, and I'm going to butcher this. The Erlenmeyer... Oh, I guess I'm not. The Erlenmeyer Flask. Thought that was a lot harder to say than I did.
Mac, why do you...